Let's turn to Ukraine now. Their military campaign has largely stalled. They're losing cities, losing soldiers, and losing morale. One reason for that is money. The US was supposed to give $60 billion to Ukraine, but that aid is pending. It hasn't been approved by the US Congress. So the European Union is debating a new idea, and a rather controversial one. Listen to the EU chief.
It is time to start a conversation about using the windfall profits of frozen Russian assets to jointly purchase military equipment for Ukraine. There could be no stronger symbol and no greater use for that money than to make Ukraine and all of Europe a safer place to live.
Here's what that means. Most central banks and sovereign funds have assets abroad. They invest in foreign currencies or government bonds or simply bank deposits. And Russia was no different. Their central bank, the Russian central bank, had assets across the world, in the US, in Europe, in Canada, in Japan, even in Australia and Singapore. The biggest chunk was parked in Western nations. And how much money are we talking about? Around $324 billion, which is 16% of their GDP, $324 billion. When the war broke out, the West decided to freeze this Russian money. So Moscow could not access it anymore, $324 billion. And the message was quite simple. Stop the war and you will get your money back. It hasn't worked though. Even without this frozen money, Russia has the upper hand. So the new proposal is this. Take the profits from the frozen Russian assets and give them to Ukraine. It can be used to buy weapons and later in reconstruction. I know it sounds like an easy solution. Ukraine needs money. The West has frozen money. So why not give it to Kiev? The chorus is growing for such a move. You heard the EU president talk about it. And the US Treasury chief fully agrees with her. In fact, she says it's urgent.
I also believe it's necessary and urgent for our coalition to find a way to unlock the value of these immobilized assets to support Ukraine's continued resistance and long-term reconstruction, where we should act together and in a considered way. I believe there is a strong international law, economic, and moral case for moving forward.
Let me repeat that last part. The US says there is a legal and moral case to use the frozen Russian money. But is that true? Well, there is precedent. Let me take you back to 1992. Saddam Hussein's Iraq had invaded Kuwait. In response, the United Nations Security Council took a drastic step. It asked all UN members to freeze Iraqi assets. And this money was then used to compensate victims of the Iraqi invasion. In 2003, it happened again. The US froze all Iraqi assets in their country. That was some $1.7 billion. Iraqi money in America, it was frozen. So countries have done it before. But the circumstances were different. In 1992, it wasn't a unilateral decision. It was agreed by the United Nations Security Council, so the decision had legitimacy. In 2003, the US was at war with Iraq, so the assets belonged to an enemy country. But Russia's case is very different. A, the UNSC has not frozen Russian assets, and B, only Ukraine is at war with Russia. The US and Europe are not, which is why Brussels is delaying the decision. It's a complete gray area, legally, politically, and morally. Let's look at all these three aspects, in fact. If the West uses the frozen Russian money, Russia will challenge it legally. It could take years to settle those cases, not to mention it will spook investors. Imagine you're running a central bank or sovereign fund, maybe in West Asia or Africa. You see Brussels freeze and take away Russian assets. What's your reaction? Mostly fear. If it's Russia today, it could be you tomorrow. And that fear could keep investors away. It will shake confidence in Europe. The second problem is the politics. Not every European country wants to use Russian money. France, for example, they say that there is no legal basis for this.
We don't have a legal basis to seize the Russian assets. And we should never act if we don't obey by the international law and by the rule of law. Because what is at the core of the European countries, at the core of the European construction.
Plus, there could be blowback. If the West seizes Russian assets, Russia will respond in kind. It can seize the Russian businesses of Western firms. A tit-for-tat move. And finally, there is the moral question. This frozen money does not belong to Vladimir Putin. It's not his personal wealth. It belongs to the people of Russia. People who may or may not agree with Russia's war. Why are they being punished by the West? Why is their money being taken away? No answers. The West keeps talking about the rule of law, about a rules-based order, but the same West is eager to walk on this legal grey area. It's hypocrisy of the highest order. Just think about all the countries invaded and ravaged by the West. How much have they paid them? Absolutely nothing. So it's not about principles or justice. It's about vindictive and selective politics. Let's see if Europe goes ahead with it.